Some historical figures had the strangest medical conditions that are truly bizarre, from mysterious syndromes to sexually transmitted infections. Let's have a look at 10 historical figures and their weird diseases. And there is a bonus for you at the end of the video, so make sure you watch to the end. Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor, wasn't just obsessed with alternating currents. His obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, was as strange as some of his inventions. For starters, he had a thing for the number 3. He would walk around a building 3 times before entering it and insisted on using 18 napkins at dinner, which is a multiple of 3, of course. He always stayed in a hotel room with a number divisible by 3 and spent the last 10 years of his life in suite 3327 on the 33rd floor of the New York hotel. His germophobia was so extreme that he refused to shake hands and avoided touching anything that wasn't spotless. But his OCD didn't stop him from changing the world, and some say it might have fueled his genius, pushing him to perfect every invention down to the tiniest detail. Joan of Arc, the young warrior who led France to victory, claimed she heard voices and saw visions from saints telling her to save her country. At age 13 in 1425, these experiences began, and while medieval folk believed they were divine messages, modern science claims that it was in fact epilepsy or schizophrenia. Temporal lobe epilepsy could explain Joan's vivid visions and auditory hallucinations, but others speculate schizophrenia due to the nature of her religious hallucinations. Either way, Joan believed deeply in her mission. The voices guided her actions, leading her to the battlefield and ultimately martyrdom. Imagine thinking you're on a divine mission, only to have historians later claim it was just a neurological issue. Abe Lincoln, tall, lanky, and awkward, wasn't just known for his height. Historians now believe that Honest Abe may have had Marfan syndrome, a rare genetic disorder affecting connective tissues. This would explain his towering 6-foot 4-inch frame, unusually long limbs, and even his thin, stretched-out face. Marfan syndrome also comes with some serious health risks, like heart problems and vision issues, though it's unclear how much it affected Lincoln's life. He certainly didn't let it slow him down. Though not officially diagnosed in his time, Lincoln's distinctive physical features have led modern doctors to think Marfan was likely the cause. Like her husband Abraham, Mary Todd Lincoln had her own share of medical conditions. She wasn't just known for her erratic behavior and mood swings. Turns out she was suffering from pernicious anemia, a condition caused by the body's inability to absorb vitamin B12. This deficiency wreaks havoc on the nervous system, leading to fatigue, weakness, and in Mary's case, intense bouts of depression and confusion. People often thought Mary was just being overly dramatic or even crazy, but her illness explains a lot about her mental state. At the time, there was no real treatment, and in fact, pernicious anemia didn't even appear in English-language medical literature until 1874, 8 years before she died. Today, we know pernicious anemia can lead to severe cognitive issues, but back then, poor Mary was just labeled unstable. Julius Caesar, one of history's most iconic leaders, wasn't only fighting wars, he was also battling his own body. Historians believe Caesar may have suffered from transient ischemic attacks, TIAs, also known as mini-strokes. These brief episodes where blood flow to the brain is blocked would have caused Caesar dizziness, confusion, and possibly seizures. Caesar's frequent fainting spells and unsteady behavior during his later years could have been symptoms of these mini-strokes. TIAs don't cause permanent damage, but they certainly hinted at deeper health problems. Even with these attacks, Caesar kept his composure, most of the time continuing to lead Rome with his usual charisma. Before I tell you more, please take 2 seconds to help me out. Hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Thank you. Now back to the video. Ludwig van Beethoven, the musical genius, wasn't just battling hearing loss. He also struggled with syphilis, a common but devastating illness in his time. Contracted through unprotected sexual interaction, syphilis wreaked havoc on Beethoven's body and mind. The infection likely contributed to his deafness and might explain his increasingly erratic behavior in later years. As syphilis advances, it can cause neurological issues, which some argued affected Beethoven's temper and depression. Though there's no definitive record of his syphilis diagnosis, many historians believe he dealt with this disease silently, relying on questionable 19th century treatments like mercury. Despite it all, Beethoven continued composing some of his most brilliant works, showing that even the most terrible of illnesses couldn't silence his genius. Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientific minds, suffered a massive nervous breakdown in 1693. After years of intense work and social isolation, Newton became paranoid, delusional, and highly anxious. It's believed his mental health deteriorated due to stress, mercury poisoning from his alchemy experiments, and lack of sleep. At one point, Newton even accused his friends of betrayal without reason. His breakdown led to a temporary withdrawal from the public eye, but he eventually recovered and returned to his work. Even with his fragile mental state, Newton's contributions to science, including the laws of motion and gravity, remain unmatched. So, turns out even geniuses can break under pressure. Emily Dickinson, the famous reclusive poet, likely suffered from agoraphobia, which is a fear of public places. For the last 20 years of her life, Dickinson rarely left her home, spending most of her time in her bedroom writing poetry. She even communicated with visitors from behind closed doors. Dickinson's extreme social isolation allowed her to pour herself into writing, producing nearly 1,800 poems, many centered around themes of death, loneliness, and nature. Though her fear of the outside world may have restricted her movements, it fueled her creativity, giving us some of the most introspective and hauntingly beautiful poetry of all time. Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, was easily recognizable by the port wine-stained birthmark on his forehead. The vascular birthmark, caused by extra blood vessels under the skin, occurs due to a malformation of capillaries during fetal development. It is generally harmless, but grows darker over time, as in the case of Gorbachev. This mark set him apart in political circles, making him instantly identifiable during a transformative era. He reportedly died at the age of 91 with a serious and protracted illness, though specifics were not publicly disclosed in detail. He spent his last few months in the hospital, but his illness seemed to have gradually worsened over time. Charles Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory, may have also been a victim of systemic lactose intolerance, a condition that plagued him for much of his life. After his famous voyage aboard the HMS Beagle, Darwin began to suffer from chronic digestive issues, nausea, vomiting, cramps, and fatigue. While many theories exist about his mysterious illness, modern research suggests lactose intolerance could be the culprit. Darwin tracked his symptoms in personal diaries, but never quite found a cure. Living with systemic lactose intolerance didn't stop him from changing the scientific world, even if it did make meals a bit of a nightmare. If you've watched the video until now, here is a bonus one for you. Pope Julius II, famously known as the Warrior Pope, wasn't just battling enemies on the battlefield. He was also reportedly fighting a sexually transmitted disease called syphilis. During his papacy in the early 1500s, Julius was rumored to have contracted syphilis through his rather indulgent lifestyle, including accusations of sexual affairs, which wasn't unheard of among clergy back then. The disease likely caused painful sores, and it's said he had to cancel a Good Friday Mass in 1508 due to a severe outbreak. Despite his illness, Julius maintained his reputation as a fierce leader, even commissioning Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling around the same time, proving his unyielding ambition amidst personal struggle. If you found this video interesting, watch this video on the screen now, and I'll see you there.